Today's guest is podcast host and fat loss coach, Paul Dermody. Paul, welcome to the Lifestyle Lifters Show.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Paul, before you share your backstory, share something about yourself that most people do not know.
Oh, something about myself that most people don't know. I think there's a lot about myself that a lot of people know. I'm very selective about what I share.
Spill the beans, my man.
What way am I creating? Probably people would know from my content. I'm a very obsessive personality based on the history of the stuff that I would put out there. But even in terms of things like movies or TV series or song lyrics, I remember things freakishly well. I can hear a song and remember it lyric to lyric. I could watch a movie 3 or 4 times, and I'm not even into movies, and recite the script cover to cover, if that counts as a weird thing. I get deeply involved, which is why I have cut my Netflix subscription. I can't afford to get rid of 30 more hours. I hate movies because they're 2.5 hours long, yet I'm okay with a 30-hour Netflix series because I get too involved.
God, I'd say that's a skill there, Paul. Your ability to memorize something even after hearing it a couple of times. That's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. And Paul, let's kind of dive in and just share a bit about your backstory of like how you kind of became an online coach. I remember, Paul, following you way back in 2017 at this stage, and I saw you like posting videos on Facebook in the warehouse gym, and I say, who's this guy here? He looks pretty cool. He's in good shape. I want to follow his content. So talk to us, Paul, just about your journey of becoming a PT and how you've kind of then evolved to become an online coach.
Oh, thanks. So to not put people who are listening to sleep, started years back. I started as a personal trainer in around 2015. Initially, I competed in a men's physique competition, and I kind of thought that was going to be the future. But what that actually did was exacerbate binge eating tendencies, which I had as a younger person. So it wasn't so much the competing that was at fault. It was the lifestyle led me back to a series of eating behaviors that I had tried to actively get rid of in my life. So coinciding at around the time of competing, I kind of had almost like to use a very cheesy term, almost like a rebirth of sorts, where I started to see life a very different way, and I started to see that I had lost myself in this competing kind of stuff. It wasn't me, it wasn't who I wanted to be. I'd lost the joy in the food I'd worked so hard to reestablish after the binge eating tendencies in my teens and early 20s. And I decided to become a personal trainer on the basis that I wanted to initially I wanted to help people compete and get into the crazy shape. That was where the desire started. Then I learned quite quickly nobody cares about what kind of shape a trainer's in overall, and I wanted to give people a healthier relationship with food. I linked up with Brian Keane Fitness. I spent a year kind of working under the Brian Keane umbrella before it was actually him that suggested I had self-employment and entrepreneurial tendencies, which I hadn't actually considered at the time. So he was kind of the one that gave me that first nudge to go out and do it myself, which I did. And I became a one-on-one trainer, worked in the warehouse gym in Galway. They were very good to me, no doubt about that. Very, very good to me for a couple of years. And long story short, I kind of topped out at that cognitive stretch. I felt I was the busiest trainer in the gym at the time. And even things like, raising my prices, which didn't seem to deter clients. You can only charge so much before, certainly I felt, to think, what, there's a diminishing returns here. I'm not actually worth this hourly fee. I can't keep just raising my prices. So I decided I had a niche for travel, and I decided I was going to just move away from Ireland and leave Ireland and try and build an online kind of coaching business that way. And that was 2018 that I made the transition from, say, in-person fully to online. Ironically, I stayed doing in-person coaching since I've moved away in the 3 places I've lived: Barcelona, Ho Chi Minh City, and now Malaga. I still have one-on-one clients. But the whole premise, the whole reason I do what I do is around more so critical thinking, like reflection, values. I'm much more interested in the person. I believe, whether I'm wrong or right here, a simple calorie calculator will tell you exactly what you need to eat and all that malarkey, and it'll tell you the exact what to do. It's not been my experience that that's been the barrier. There's been much greater things. A lot of the advice online doesn't quite engage with the deeper sense of why we would do something. And that's kind of the gap, or certainly the reason that I wanted to do what I do with the clients that I have. It's not for everybody. I've always tried to be honest with myself. I wanted to think initially I could give everybody a transformative experience. That obviously hasn't been the case. You're for some people and you're not for others. But I love what I do, and it's only made me get even more clear on what I want to do as I've gotten a little bit older. I'm also 32 years of age, nearly 33, and priorities change a little bit. Fitness takes a very different role as you get a little bit older, and you're hoping to not project that perspective onto other people, but you're hoping to use knowledge plus perspective to encourage people to find their own with a sense of autonomy and self-awareness. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, man, that's amazing there. Just addressing the why instead of just giving that, a set and forget kind of macros, calories, protein, carbs, etc. Understanding the why behind the Paul. And I know a lot of your content, Paul, it centers around improving your relationship with food. And I was just I was reading one of your blog posts, and actually you made a great point which really resonated with me, in that, look, food is always going to be there. If you eat 4 meals a day, that's like 1,460 meals per year. So it's just really important to like establish a good relationship with food from the offset. So you kind of don't ever feel like guilty or as if you're doing something wrong if you're eating out at the weekend, or if you have a piece of chocolate that you effed up, now you're going to go binge eating. So tell me, Paul, then, because I know this is how you kind of base a lot of your content. How can you kind of help someone who has somewhat of a bad relationship with food improve that?
It's a great question, man. The food will always be there concept is just kind of like a reminder to people to slow down and stop trying to fight the inevitable, obviously. And I really appreciate the insights that you have on that one. When people have a turbulent relationship with food, the first thing I'm trying to do is remind them, you're going to be in this relationship for all your life. You cannot escape this. It's not like drugs or alcohol or any kind of thing, or social media, where you can remove yourself from it and distance yourself from it and vow to never have it again. You need food every day for the rest of your life. And I think it's paramount that we develop a very healthy relationship with food in many respects as well. I'm sure you'll have encountered this yourself. The flexible dieting message, or the you have unconditional permission to eat message, which is definitely something I believe in, that can go too far. What we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage you can do what you want. Now the real question becomes, should you? It's not a do whatever you want without consequence. Food will always be there as a reminder that you can always eat what you want. It doesn't mean you always will, it means you can. So you have to choose a behavior and accept that consequence. And that's kind of where it comes down to. So you're trying to get people into a very calm frame of mind. Like, people fall into thinking traps. We all do it. All of us have the tendency to catastrophize it. Maybe, for example, in my life, it might not manifest itself as a bad meal anymore, a quote unquote bad meal, but maybe a quieter business month. And it's like, oh, the wheels are falling off. I'm going to be homeless in a week. And we all have that tendency to catastrophize and to believe our own thoughts and to believe our first impulses. And that happens around food, where you might think, oh, I've really messed up, I've destroyed the diet. But similarly, I don't find it helpful in my experience to tell people, oh, you shouldn't feel guilty, you shouldn't feel guilty. Instead, it's more to pay attention to the guilt and start to introspect a little bit further on what that guilt could mean. Is it a false presumption that, this is just an autopilot reaction because I think this food is bad? Or do you have inherently unhelpful eating patterns that you do need to address and to make a little bit more healthy? And that's kind of how I look at it, because I know the industry swings in extremes. People are either very much anti-diet and weight neutral completely, or very flexible dieting, track your macros and whatnot. I don't really have an agenda. I don't really care what anyone does at all. You can check in with me as far as I'm concerned if you're a client, and you could honestly do whatever the hell you want, as long as you know why you did it and you're happy that you made that decision and you've chosen a behavior and accepted that consequence. That's the way I look at it from a coach's perspective. But similarly, then, you can't allow yourself to turn around and get frustrated and angry that you're eating, you want a certain outcome and you're not doing the things that would in any way lead to that outcome. It sounds almost trivial. And I'm not saying this to be in any way preachy. I'm saying it because I enjoy the exchange. I don't consider myself that expert role between clients. I love the exchange. I love delving deeper into people's motivations. As I said at the start, I find people eat in excess, nothing to do with knowledge. It's to do with the information that they're given doesn't engage with a deeper sense of why. Maybe people have very stressful lives. Work maybe isn't particularly fulfilling. I've talked to people who have been suppressing their real sexuality. I've had people share stories with me that I had never considered, and it stops them expressing maybe who they really are in life. And it runs so deep. So that's why I find the older I get and the more experience I get, the scope of the advice I have gets a lot more general and certainly a lot less certain, if that makes sense. So like, yeah, get a calorie calculator if you're ready to adhere to go nuts by all means. But if you have a really strained relationship with food, and a lot of the reason that we do eat in excess is because we're not addressing why we feel compelled to fall onto these dietary extremes in the first place. That's certainly one of the reasons I've encountered anyway. I don't want to start making blanket prescriptions for everybody by any means.
Yeah, almost kind of using food somewhat as a coping mechanism at times.
Yeah, because I think we all have a tendency. I think we're all in modernity. The modern world has us all addicted in some shape, way, or form. Whether it's hard work, I mean, excess work or excess social media or food. It's like there's an element of dystopia about the world where you can literally have and do anything in an instant. And in my opinion, it has the potential to keep us financially broke. It has the potential to keep us slightly, less fulfilled. The dopamine in our brain. The state of the modern world is lends itself to being very highly stressed, overworked, over caffeinated, tired, constantly scrolling. The attention.
Immediacy,
all of it. So, you start to talk to people about things like nutrition and maybe a bad relationship with food. You start to realize that this person hasn't slept in 3 days, and then they're just catastrophizing one bad donut. And I could talk about this for a day and feel like I've said absolutely nothing. That's how much I think the scope runs deep, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, no, a lot to unpack there, Paul. And you kind of mentioned too about just maybe the importance of questioning your beliefs. I know you kind of center but why is that the case? And have you just even in the past year, Paul, is there anything like food or training related that maybe you would have previously believed, but you've kind of questioned those assumptions that you might have had?
Interestingly, the biggest one that I have had in the last year, when I was 16, my parents brought me to my first gym on my request. They used to drive me in. It was about a 10-minute drive, and I used to go in every evening during, say, fifth year and sixth year, and I would do my workout. Didn't know what I was doing, obviously, and I thought, geez, when I'm older, I'll never leave this place. And then I got a little bit older. I moved out of home, and then the gym was around the corner. It's still about a 20-minute walk, but I could walk. And all of a sudden I started thinking, oh, the gym's a walking distance. If I had a car, this would be a lot easier. There'd be less friction. Then I got myself a car and I could drive to the gym. And then I started driving to the gym, and I obviously adapted to that. And I thought, oh, the gym is a 10-minute drive. I have to drive myself. If the gym was near me, this would be so much easier. Then I moved to Ho Chi Minh City, and there was an apartment gym. And I actually remember this afternoon really well. I was lying in my bed having a nap, and I was supposed to be working out according to my schedule. And I thought, oh, the gym's all the way downstairs. If only it was like, if I had equipment in my room, it would be so much easier. And honestly, it taught me that there's never going to be no friction between you and doing the workout, right? Like when I was 16, I was better equipped to go when I had no autonomy. And then I found myself 30 years of age in Ho Chi Minh City, and it was 25 floors down in an elevator, and it still seemed too far away. That was friction. So what I've actually done, and I'm not suggesting this by any means, I've cancelled my gym membership, and I have a pair of rings and a little step outside in my terrace.
See, that looks awesome, man. Yeah,
I love it. I love doing it. So I've just decided that, because I'm gotten really bad in the last couple of years for like, oh, I'm a bit off it today, I didn't sleep well, I'm not going to go and do heavy deadlifts today, I'll put it off. And all of a sudden you miss 2 workouts a week. At least when the home gym is in my terrace, I go with the something is better than nothing approach in a very structured way, so I can get out and I can do my very short workout and not kill myself and be very consistent with it. And ultimately, the answer to your question is, I have stripped it right back to simplicity so that I can reduce the friction and focus on the basics. And that might look different for everybody, but to me, because I live in such a sunny climate, it just makes sense for me to strip it all back, be very minimal, be very simple about it. Rings, then a step, and actually do the work. So I'm not actually reading about heavy deadlifts and not doing the deadlifts.
Oh man, I can somewhat relate to that. Like just kind of delaying that procrastination to some degree. Like I find whenever it's around about the time to work out, I'll find like, oh, I forgot to do this, and I'll just like go back to work or go back to doing some form of content. You're like, let's just address the big elephant in the room here. You don't want to train because you have deadlifts on the program today. So absolutely can relate to that, Paul. Tell me then, Paul.
But before you go on, do you find as well where if you're doing your own thing, you're maybe creating your own content and you're doing bits and pieces for yourself, you feel a little bit mentally fatigued because you might have had 2 or 3 intense hours at a computer in the morning, and it's like, oh, could you be bothered? I don't know if that ever happens to you, but that's
and sometimes, yeah, I always say to our members, sometimes some days you just build strength and other days you build character. And the days you build character, the days you go, even though you don't necessarily feel like doing it. But I love your principle of something is always better than nothing. And I think this can apply to so many areas, and none more so than food. So just kind of going off the back of that, Paul, I'll use myself as my own best example. Like, I used to kind of have that absolute kind of thinking that, you know, foods are either good or they're bad. You're either on the diet or you're off the diet. And I tried out Andy Frisetta's 75 hard challenge twice, got to day 42 on both events, and I forgot to take a picture. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically, you know, follow a diet, no cheat meals, no alcohol. So I just went completely extreme, just like you now, as in there's no bread, there's no there's no chocolate, there's no whatever, like cappuccino, any of these foods and drinks, absolutely nothing. And I just got to the point, day 42, forgot to do something, and what was my instinct? To deal with my emotions, I started binge eating. And I went on an absolute binge. And, you know, if I was using MyFitnessPal that day, I did an unplanned 10,000 calorie challenge very, very easily. But I've since kind of adopted, Paul, my mindset that, you know what, like, there's foods aren't necessarily good or bad. Some are higher calories, some are lower calories, some are more nutrient dense, some are less nutrient dense. And it's something that I'll admit, it took me a while to kind of come to terms with, because I was just used to having and eating in such a specific way for all my life. So for someone out there, Paul, who wants to, you know, they have some aesthetic goals, they want to drop a bit of body fat. Why do some people have a hard time believing, or how can we at least help them understand that, you know what, you can have a piece of chocolate here and there, or you can have a slice of pizza here and there, or you don't need to give up going out with your friends at restaurants and still get results?
I think having unconditional permission to do the thing is the foundation. I think as soon as you feel that you have to renounce it completely, it's when it becomes the constant white noise in your mind. But if we're going to teach people, it comes first and foremost, in my opinion, making sure we remove passive shame and judgment from the tone. I think trainers, we can all fall victim to this, where we mean well, but we deliver messages kind of almost sarcastically and passive aggressively, like, are you really, you're still clean eating? That's so 2014. That kind of jokey mentality, but it's not going to land well for someone who's still really struggling with it. So I think being very empathetic to the struggle, having the struggle itself, I think you'll agree, will make you much better equipped to actually teach the struggle. Because I do think there's a lot of cowboys jumping on trends that they don't fully understand or can relate to because they think it's going to sell. So that's kind of, I think you cannot teach anybody to go further than you've gone yourself, no matter how knowledgeable you are. Shame and embarrassment should not be the vehicles. It should be done through empathy and understanding, as far as I'm concerned. But as far as actually, when I was a bit younger, when I was making this piece myself, whenever it was, say 2015, coming out of competing, I remember I went very black and white myself, and I heard something in a podcast years back. It said there's something similar, that we should look at dietary patterns as a whole and not an individual meal. And I almost internally got defensive, thinking, what kind of rubbish is that? Just doesn't know what he's talking about. Is an esteemed PhD in nutrition, if I'm not mistaken. Like, sure, the hell did I know? But that defensiveness was obviously me not being ready to part with one of my black and white ideas, because it protected me, which is really important. I think the best thing we can ever do for people is create an environment for them to be honest. If you're coaching somebody, or if you're putting out content, or if you're somebody who is responsible for, and you're aware of your responsibility for the thought process of others, something I've certainly had to become aware of more with things like podcasts and content over the last few years. How we say what we say and the way we deliver it is going to be very important. People will not change their minds, in my opinion, based on top-down expert advice. People change their mind when they've decided they know they need to change, and they're going to find the right influence or the right space or the right environment for them to change. When I've noticed, and I believe people are capable of change because I've seen it time and time again. I have watched people talk themselves around change for a period of 3, 4, 5 months, 1 year, 2 years with me, right? Talk themselves around change, share the ideas, share the win, share the loss, And then they email me, thank you so much for changing my mind. I'm like, I didn't change a thing. Go back. You've done everything. And then they'll eventually say something, well, thanks for being the influencer, thanks for being the person who held the space, or whatever it's going to be. I'm like, fine, yeah, cool, no problem. Absolutely happy to walk this journey, but you created change because you were ready and you had to lean into the difficult things. And it's very scary when you start to incorporate a quote unquote bad food for the first time because you believe it's inherently fattening. Yeah. It is a very difficult thing to deny that first impulse that tells you I've gotten fat, and then that feeling that comes with it. That feeling, when you eat a slice of pizza and logically it couldn't be fat because all you have to do is relate it to another person if they ate a slice of pizza, but you feel it immediately. And then you also have that actual nagging voice of, well, I've destroyed the diet, and that black and white absolute thinking that needs to be trained away to seek the context. I do this with many clients. I've done it with myself. It's kind of where I started to, in my own journey. I since learned it's an actual practice in binge eating recovery. I think they call it Socratic questioning. They use them. But like, how do I know this is bad? Is this bad in all situations? Is this bad for everybody? Is sugar definitely always bad? Because, what about the context of diabetes? And you start to think, so everything's bad in all situations? Maybe not. How could this be a good thing? And you start to put reframes on it. But again, these reframes aren't so you can just do what you want without consequences. These reframes are so that you have the permission to think and be a little bit more clear, so you can make healthy decisions because you actually want to, rather than you feel compelled to. That's the biggest difference. I think it's almost like, how do we get the shift as an industry? If people hand over money and say, I would really like this goal, how do we get them to understand, is it well curated? And do they actually want to do the actions rather than feel compelled? That's how I look at it. And the final thing that I have on my mind is, and I've seen tremendous value in this. It's not sexy. It won't go viral. You won't see it on Instagram feed, not at the top. If you want to get really good at the skill of dieting, you need to become an expert at the skill of not dieting. You need to be able to, in my opinion, take yourself into a non-fat loss phase, or a weight neutral goal, or a strength in the gym goal, or a fitness goal, where the reward isn't inherently a change in adipose tissue. And if you don't feel, or you need to be able to inherently gain the adipose tissue, put on the substrate that is body fat, without seeing it as a scarlet letter on your self-worth. And I don't think anybody who can do those things can really reap the fruits of healthy fat loss, healthy fitness goals, because there's too much emotional attachment on either direction. The pendulum swings too extreme. I remember being in the Philippines in 2019. This is absolutely true. I was having cocktails. They're about 300-400 calories a go, big, massive things full of cream. And I had put up a bit of body fat at this point when I was traveling. I was about 15, 20 pounds of fat heavier. And I was in a place in my life where, not that I was okay with it, but I'd made peace with it because I was making decisions that lent itself to that. And sure. One guy at the bar, I know he meant nothing by it. And I always try to assume and attribute to hopefully ignorance rather than malice. But he was added me as a friend on Facebook, and he saw my competing picture where I'm like, Rrr! And then he sees my little bit of a belly hanging out of me and drinking my thing. And he just goes, what happened? And he realized his words. He goes, I don't mean it that way, but and he kind of gestured, you're fat now.
He said it before he thought about it. Sure. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of what happens when I consume more energy than I need. And I'm kind of there like, I don't need this 400-calorie cocktail, but it's Christmas Day in the Philippines. I'm not going to have salads and water.
Sure.
And I had been doing bits and pieces of travel around Singapore, around Thailand, around Philippines, and living in Vietnam at the time. And I was okay with it. I wasn't trying to gain body fat, but because I didn't have that emotion, it didn't bother me too much. Then when I left Vietnam, moved to Spain here, I decided this January that, you know what, it's time now to actually get a bit serious with a fitness goal. And I don't see the breaking down of the substrate fat as any part of my character. I see it almost as separate from me. It's just another goal in my life that I'm trying to remove the emotion from. So I got really good at being weight neutral, which was gaining a bit of weight through travel. So now I'm really good at losing body weight because I don't see the obstacles the way a lot of people see them, as some kind of reflection on who they are, some kind of pass, fail.
Don't attach your identity
to
absolutely.
your appearance. I don't see a day where I miss my targets as a catastrophe. I kind of go with the, if I'm doing well on average, I'm doing okay. It's a long-winded answer, I know, but I'm encouraging my clients, I'm encouraging people to become comfortable in situations that maybe they haven't allowed themselves to expose themselves to.
And I love that. Yeah, that's an interesting approach to thinking there, Paul. And I know then you mentioned you then did try the aggressive approach. Was it January this year where maybe from being in a case where you're on holiday mode and not being, too mindful of your calories, to you dropped as low as 1,300.
I tried to go 1,300. I lasted about 2 or 3 days on 1,300, and then I went to 1,500, and I
Oh,
lasted.
painful. Let's talk about that, Paul. How did you find? How was that a aggressive dieting experiment?
I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I didn't enjoy the feeling of eating only 1,500 calories a day, but it gave me what I wanted. I dropped 13, 14 pounds quite quickly. It took me about into week 3 to actually really see a difference, but there was obviously people on my Instagram that were pushing back a little bit, saying this was totally against my message, which it absolutely wasn't. My message is critical thinking and long term. Like the something I don't think people consider enough, and I really urge them to say what it is. Any fat loss, the goal of fat loss itself is in and of itself unsustainable. It doesn't matter if it's 2,000, 2,500, 1,200. If your goal is fat loss, you can only do it for so long before you need to take a break from the fat loss itself. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to gain fat. It means you might maintain, get stronger, get fitter. But I decided I wanted to try and do in 4 weeks what would otherwise take me 10. Drop about close to a stone of body fat. I did that. And because I had no emotional attachment, because I was psychologically ready, because I had really enjoyed myself over Christmas, I just felt I needed an aggressive period to kick me into gear. I lost about a stone. Not all of that was going to be body fat. I can't be sure how much was. But when I started to taper back up, I didn't go and do what many crash dieters do, which is go from a deficit to complete fuck it mode. I went from a massive deficit to a small deficit. And I have continued to lose an average of about 200 grams a week, which is nothing, which is absolutely nothing a week since then. I've dropped since Christmas, about 16 pounds overall.
Oh, man.
About 12 of which I dropped in January. So like that'll show you how slow it's been between, say, February and July. But I haven't been, once I got the first bit off, it felt easy, and I wasn't willing to do what it took anymore. So I just took my calories down from initially about 3,500 down to 12, 13, 14, 1,500, and then back up to 2,800.
Yeah.
And
so you're at 2,800 now, Paul, averaging?
Give or take. I'm not
I don't
being fully
obsessive.
track, but I can naked eye it with my eye. But my whole point was calories in affects calories out. So when I went down to 1,500, I felt my NEAT activity reduce. I definitely wasn't 100%. Burning as many calories because I was lazier. But when I went from massive deficit to still a deficit, but small deficit, I felt my NEAT activity go higher. I wanted to go out to do my skipping rope. I wanted to do my pull-ups. I was more motivated. So again, it's this black and white thinking where people were messaging me going, 1,300 is unsustainable. And I'm like, correct. What's the point of this? They're like, well, you're on a binge after. I'm thinking, no, I'm not. Definitely not. Because I feel in a really good psychological place for this. And I'm just trying to open up dialogue for intelligent conversation, because as uncomfortable as it might be, if you inherently think 1,200 bad, 1,400 bad, then that's going to become self-fulfilling. If you ever have a day where you have 12 or 1,400 and you're just going to press the fuck it button because you feel you've destroyed your whole progress. But if you see it as a spectrum of adherence where I can't adhere on 1,200, maybe I'll try 14, maybe I'll try 16, maybe I'll try 19, maybe I'll try 2,100, maybe I won't diet at all, maybe I'm not psychologically ready. It's people's psychological state that prevents them from adhering much more than any number does. I've been in places in my life where I've tried to diet going from 3.5 down to 3,000 calories, and I couldn't sustain it because of the nature of the travel. But I've also been in a place in my life where I've gone from 3,500 down to 1,500 for a few weeks, and I felt sharp within a couple of weeks or days, pardon. It took its toll eventually. But once you know what the get out strategy is, like you can save aggressively or you can save conservatively with your money. But if your plan is to throw both amounts of money away after you've saved, it doesn't matter how you save. It's what you do after.
Sure.
Pardon. So that's just kind of the way I look at it. It's what we think we know in every scenario clouds our judgment. We need to be a bit more contextual and step back.
Brilliant. And just one important point there, Paul, just for all our listeners there, as Paul said, okay, he tried 1,300, it wasn't sustainable. He tried 1,500 and you dropped the weight pretty quickly. But one thing that Paul didn't do was, as you said, you didn't just go back from 15 to 3,500 once you met got your target goal weight, you slowly increase the calories, because that's a mistake, Paul, isn't it? You know, I'm sure you find the same. A lot of people make that once they reach their desired physique, the next question is, how do you maintain it? And the way you maintain it is, first you have to understand that maybe you're being more, because you've lost weight, a lighter body generally burns less calories than a heavier one. So you need to understand, you don't just resort back to how you previously ate pre-dieting phase, and you slowly scale things up. And that's a great sign of your metabolism, Paul. Then the fact that you've actually still managed on the average to go down in weight, even though your calories have almost doubled if they're averaging at 2,800.
Yeah, it's a simple science in a sense. I decided not to even go slowly. I went straight back up. I actually did go from, say, 15 back up to 2,500 almost overnight in a sense. But I consider it a simple science. Like you said, spot on, and you are spot on. You're a smaller entity when you've lost weight. But I had only lost about 13 pounds. So all I was doing was, my maintenance calories is, let's say, if you have an equation for it, my old body weight is what I'm maintaining on, and all I'm doing is subbing in my new body weight. So,
Sure.
you know, it's not as extreme as a lot of people worry about, those metabolic adaptations. Mine certainly hasn't been. And also, I go back to calories in affects calories out. Because I'm lighter and because I'm fitter,
Yes, great
I feel
point.
I'm stronger, and I feel I can do more on the skipping rope. I feel I can do more on the rings, which means that I'm getting better muscular adaptations. And that's why, being contextual, looking at both sides of the equation, like I can't synthesize muscle from nothing, so I do need energy to help that process. But the whole dichotomy of it's too low, it's too high, you're going to fail, etc. There's a psychological aspect, but there's also a knowledge aspect. If you multiply your body weight in kilos by 24 to get your resting calories for, let's say, 80 kilos now, whatever I am, 80 kilos by 24. I started the whole process at 86 kilos. So it's 86 by 24 to get my BMR. Now it's 80 by 24. It's really as simple as that. Now, obviously there are nuances, because I don't think calorie calculators tell the full story, but even just that mindset to realize that it is based on a simple scientific formula, not emotion. If you use emotion for this thing, you've no place dieting in the first place anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great and interesting way to look at it, Paul. And tell me then, just currently, I know at the moment you said you're obviously you're in Malaga. How's life in Malaga, Paul? Are you currently working on any goals, or is it just a case of like maintaining, and something is always better than nothing?
Right now, for training wise, I'm just enjoying the outside door, some pull-ups, push-ups, and pistol squats and Nordics. I love it here. We only have 2 more months here, and then we're going to move on again. I'm currently working on a personal project, which is not very exciting. There's a website called medium.com for aspiring, and in my case, delusional people who think they want to be writers. So I've been working on my Medium content for the last month or so, which I've really enjoyed. So very quiet summer here. To literally train on the terrace outside my bedroom, work on the little thing on my bedroom, and then I eat in the kitchen in a small 1-bed apartment. I love it. It's a very simple life. It's been the biggest revelation I've had in the past, certainly 1 year, probably 3, but definitely 1, last 12 months, is simple living. Less is more. Absolutely. Less clutter, less physical things. I had a couple of experiences in Vietnam with some, what you might consider fiscally or materially or financially successful people, which were amazing, don't get me wrong, but it taught me that if you can't be happy on your morning stroll and a cup of coffee, you're never going to be happy on these crazy parties and things like that.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah. Just being appreciative of enjoying your bowl of porridge in the morning, and being grateful. The small little things. It's the small little things.
100%. If your sensory experience of a bowl of porridge and anything crazy, say material wise or anything, they shouldn't be too far apart as far as I'm concerned. So I've really enjoyed, it's been one of the most enriching experiences of my entire life. I hesitate to use the word minimalist, because I don't actually know what it means. My definition is not having more than you need. We call it minimalist light or minimalist 0.2 or something, but what I've tried to do is really get rid of a lot of the crap I don't need, a lot of clutter, mental clutter as well. And just live a very, very simple, ordinary life. And the more simple and ordinary I focus on it becoming, it just seems to make much more sense. I'm so much more happy. I just don't feel in any way, I feel light. It's the best way I can put it. It's not every day is perfect, or geez, don't get me wrong, I still have my days, but it's one less stress to manage when you just know that you have a few bits and pieces you need. You have your day, you have your routine. It's nice and simple.
I love it. I love it. Appreciate it. Just appreciate the simplicity and some of the small things. Having your coffee, going for a nice stroll,
Yeah.
getting up at sunrise, whatever. I love it. I'm somewhat similar now. It's something I've definitely adapted to, Paul. You mentioned you're moving on.
Yeah, yeah, we're moving back. Well, it's tricky right now because there's no visa sorted, but there's flights booked, so we're definitely going. We're heading back towards Asia, and
Oh, interesting.
yeah, really excited. I wasn't when I left Asia the first time. I wasn't ready to. It was just because of visa expiration. That was the only
Sure.
reason, and obviously brutal lockdowns in Vietnam. They were very communist, I will say.
Gotcha.
But we're going back. There's only holiday visas at the moment, so we don't know what we're going to do. Maybe travel a little bit. Maybe go to Japan. Go visit a friend in South America. We've just kind of travel plans at the minute, but kind of structured travel, which I'm very excited for. So nothing concrete, but I'm looking forward to that in a way.
Brilliant. Awesome.
Have you been out that part of the world?
I have not. I'm not too well traveled yet, Paul. I've been to America at the West Coast. Lived in Spain and Marbella for
Around the
5 months, and then yeah, just around the corner for you, and just a few other small places here and there. But no, never been to Asia, never been to South America, but definitely on the to-do list. Potentially 2023 I'd like to try Dubai first and kind of take things from there. But yeah, Paul, I love all of this so far. I just want to do a few rapid fire Q&A questions. The first one being, Paul, what's one new habit you've implemented since last year?
I think if less is more counts, much more simplicity in everything. If that counts. If it doesn't count, I can give a better answer.
No, just I guess subtraction instead of always trying to add.
Yeah, always. But I've never really been much about addition, but I've even got more deliberate in that. Yeah. Also trying to get I'm trying to get physically very strong again. I hadn't been doing that for a long time, and I'm doing that now. And I've seen the benefits even in general day-to-day life, because I've been naturally very injury prone person. So even just trying to actually get very physically strong but smart and mobile. So simplicity and strength at the moment.
I love it. I love it. What's the best book you read, Paul, the last year?
Best book I've read, School of Life, Alain de Botton.
Interesting. Never heard. Would you recommend? Obviously you would.
I would recommend it if you're interested in understanding your own complicated stupidity. Yeah. If you suspect deep down you're an idiot, and you feel like you're an idiot, and then you beat yourself up for being an idiot, it's quite comforting, because we're all idiots. But I read it almost as an element of confirmation bias, to be fair, because when I saw the synopsis, it's the stuff I gravitate toward. I'm not saying I didn't learn a lot from it as if I'm super smart. It's just that's where my energy naturally goes anyway. So.
Gotcha. Okay. When you hear the word successful, Paul, who's the first person that comes to mind?
In this modern world, those who can live happily with a quiet, normal, quote unquote mundane life, those who can genuinely live happily and affect others to do the same sincerely. Anyone I meet who just has a warmth and an energy of happiness. I live in a little community in Malaga. The fruit and veg vendor on the street is they're the happiest people I've ever met in my life.
Yes.
They're probably on minimum wage. They won't be on Instagram. They won't be on any algorithms. And I'm so inspired by genuine simplicity.
The everyday heroes. I love it. I love it. Awesome. Brilliant. What's your favorite movie, Paul?
I'm not a big movie lover, but Edward Scissorhands would have been my favorite movie growing up.
Gotcha.
Have you seen it?
I haven't. No, I have not seen it.
Strange one, I know.
I'm not the biggest movie fan myself. What do you feel, Paul? Then, I'll actually be interested to hear your choice. What's the most underrated gym exercise, or just underrated exercise you feel that most people should do more of?
I believe that, and this isn't just bias because I'm doing it. I do it because I think this. I think a TRX or a pair of rings and any kind of pull motion, because every single fitness level can start by standing upright and do a row, and then that row becomes more flat row until you build up to pull up strength. So I think the pull, the TRX or the ring, the body weight pull is so diverse that everyone can nail it at some level, where you're doing weighted pull-ups or whether you've done your first body weight row, everyone can do the body weight pull. So I'm cheating a little bit because I'm changing the angle and I'm using the strap to.
There's different levels, yeah, and they're so versatile too. The rings, they're freaking awesome.
I love them.
Yeah, look at any gymnast too. Like it's the shape that they're in just from doing the calisthenics. There is a lot to be said about just mastering the body weight.
it's frightening when you see them and they move so gracefully and they can control every part of the rep and every part of the muscle fibers, and they just look so
Yes.
so effortless. Yeah, I admire gymnasts so much, and there's a real elegance to it in that a lot of fitness goals these days is, this is certainly my experience, maybe this is just my own little world, people seem to suffer for their fitness goals in ways. People don't seem to necessarily love the gym or their diet and then, low intensity cardio on a treadmill and hoods up. And it just seems to be a very blood and sweat and tears endeavor. Whereas I always feel when you watch a gymnast, they're in flow.
Yes. Absolutely.
They're engaged. They're in that zone of proximal development. I just really admire it. I feel they're very engaged in the moment. One thing I was even going to say to you is because I've been doing my exercise outside, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I noticed that when I was in gyms, like if rep 6, rep 7, rep 8 started to feel a little bit difficult, I'd start to think, oh, I'm not going to get rep 9, or you might rack it early. You think, shit, I didn't get 8 reps or whatever. But when you're just training outside, fresh air, no music, no distractions, you can almost begin to feel the difficulty in the exercise and then recenter and think, I'm just going to push past this. I know it sounds a bit of an over the top thought process in a given minute, but I found that you can actually feel the limitations are being created by the mind. It's telling you to stop the set. You don't have the next 3 reps in you. You're done. You're burned out. And then you actually do have them. You can just stop and slow down and recenter and push yourself that little bit extra harder in quality work.
Eliminating the noise and being more in tune with your body, I feel. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's interesting, Paul. And love the TRX too. I love the rings myself. And finally, just off the rapid fire, Paul, what's one question you wish people asked you more of?
I don't necessarily wish people ask me anything more. I'm intrigued on what they're actually struggling with so that we can talk about it. What I probably would consider is, I think people should ask more questions inward rather than outward. I think modern life has this element of guru culture, guru worshipping, which prevents genuine reflection. I'll give you an example. I know this isn't rapid fire. I recently heard Johnny Wilkinson, and I think if it was somebody who wasn't a rugby player, it might have landed a bit more mainstream. But I heard him say something to the effect of, I kicked the winning, and I don't follow rugby, so I could destroy what actually happened. But I think he kicked the winning kick in 2003 in the World Cup or something.
2003 World Cup final, yeah.
Exactly. And he said he worked his whole life for that it was the pinnacle of his career. It was going to be the pinnacle of his career, and it didn't actually change him in the way he had hoped. And then he had a bit of a spiritual awakening, and he realized, I remember poignantly, he said, I'm the same Johnny when I clean the dishes as I was when I kicked the World Cup. If I'm not, does that mean that anyone who kicks points is worth more as a human than the dishwasher? No, that's not true. He said he had a spiritual awakening that one isn't more important than the other in the context of his life. And then he said he's given advice to young men, particularly, maybe young women too, that they need to bleed and grind and suffer for their dreams. They need to work at all costs, torture themselves. And he doesn't even believe that anymore. So now he has other people that he's once given advice to that are probably destroying themselves based on his advice that he doesn't believe anymore. So I think the guru worship culture can prevent genuine reflection. I remember once someone gave me advice on my business. Things were going well in Ho Chi Minh, really started to pick up, and someone said something casual like, I can't remember what exactly they said, but like, oh, you should hammer it in now and double it and set yourself free. And I thought, I don't want to work harder. I'm good. I'll do it if I need to. I'll do it when I want to. Right now, where I'm at in my life, things are ticking over nicely. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't understand how I didn't want to crack on and crush the world, but I didn't want to. There's only a point of diminishing returns. And again, these are nice little reminders to me that if you continue to take blind advice, even from gurus, even from smart people, Goggins, everyone, you could be taking advice that really goes against who you actually are. That's the way I look at it. And it can prevent that real, genuine reflection. Do I even want to? Like, Goggins ran to the airport, apparently, according to Joe Rogan after their interview. Fair enough, amazing. But I don't want to run to the airport. I want to get a nice comfortable Uber. That's just my opinion. So a lot of this guru worshipping stuff can prevent us from actually connecting with our deeper self. And I think we all have a tendency to fall victim to it. I know 100%. When I got into self-help, yeah. You know the
yes. Something I've literally only started doing even the past week. I try just add more white space to my calendar. And I used to, when I go on a walk, you're listening to podcasts, you're checking Instagram, you're checking social media. Just nothing now. Leave the phone down. Leave the AirPods at home.
I like that.
And just have a think. Just think, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
That's that's
and
really interesting. The modern world has made it very easy. I go cliche, but it has made it very easy to not check in with yourself at all. If you
absolutely, and
you don't have to have
I'm
a
the
thought in the
only.
world.
Yeah, and you know what? I love the self-help. I love the self-development. I love trying to improve, but sometimes there's only so much your brain can process, and the hardest thing for us all to do, I feel, is actually just think more. And we usually know then whatever it is that we feel we're missing, we usually know the cause of it when there's just silence and it's just you and nobody else and that bit of stillness. So I can definitely relate to that. Something I'm 100% working on, Paul. And just before we wrap up, Paul, I want to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for just, I love your message, simplicity, building the relationship with food, and just maybe eliminating as opposed to always adding. And I really feel your message comes across. I mean, I had Steve Griffin on the podcast too, a couple of weeks ago at this stage, and wow, like just him just being a prime example of someone that you were, as you said, I feel you're not someone who takes a whole lot of credit for what you do, but you were the guide at least. You were the guide. He's the hero in his story, but you were still the guy that helped him get there. So just admire you, and thank you so much for your fantastic message, Paul. What are 1 to 3 takeaways you'd like our listeners to implement?
Well, thank you, by the way, dude. Very lovely words. I really appreciate it. And if you, by the way, the self-help thing, I'm with you. I do like learning a lot. That's why I love the book School of Life, by the way, if it's something you want to look up. I feel he says a lot without actually saying anything in the best possible way. It forces you to reflect. I don't feel he gives any solutions in the book at all in the best possible sense. It's just very thought-provoking stuff. So it might be for you, it might not be for you as well. That's the kind of thing that you might look up the synopsis and see. 1 to 3 takeaways. I suppose if I say this in a way whereby I'll cringe the least in 10 years, when you look back at your old content and you cringe a little bit, something that might be true. I would say, you mentioned there, with life, I think it's an element of exclusion rather than inclusion. But with diet, I think it's the opposite. I think if you focus more on inclusion and abundance rather than exclusion, I think that's a very nice way to approach it because it breeds choice. I think everybody's their own best guide. I hold the belief that everybody's their own best leader. There might be times where you want a trainer or a coach to guide the process with accountability, or you want someone to work with the program for you, or any good, valid, logical reason someone can teach you. But I don't think anybody's more equipped to know you than yourself. So I think don't ever neglect getting to know yourself a little bit better. And I think much of the modern world, for all its brilliance and for all as much as I love it to bits, it's changed my life. Facebook literally got me out of a minimum wage job and into the situation I'm in now. It's also the modern world is equipped to prevent us ever having a thought of getting to know ourselves if we don't want to. And whatever checking back in with yourself frequently looks like to you, I think it's something that it's way too easy to neglect and forget completely. I really do.
That's the most difficult thing you can do.
It really is.
Difficult thing. It really, yeah. I'm 100% with you in that, Paul. Final 2 questions, Paul. I'm big into routines. What do the first 30 to 60 minutes of your typical day look like? Or do you have a morning routine, Paul?
No, my first 60 seconds are a glass of water every single day. For my first thing I do, a glass of water, hydrate first thing in the morning. But no, I don't really. I like to let the day take its flow. So I'd be lying if I said I had a routine.
Gotcha.
I like to try and get some sunlight, but that's about it.
Yeah, nice. Absolutely. While you can avail it. And last question, Paul, because this is the Lifestyle Lifters show. What's your definition of living a successful life?
Similar to what I said earlier, I think being, when I mentioned guru worshipping, and I think it sold us the dream that we can all be these really sexy, flashy success stories, which is a lovely thought. It's not true, but it's a lovely thought. I think when you can be happy with a very healthy dose of pessimism and a very healthy dose of mundanity to live the best life you can in spite of your circumstances, ultimately is what I would consider. Awesome. Pessimism in a good way. Pessimism for optimists.
Awesome. I love it. Paul Dermody, thank you so much for hopping on. Paul, for anyone who wants to learn more about you, what you offer, where can people find and learn more about you?
Instagram is probably the easiest place, Paul Dermody PT, podcast, Paul Dermody podcast. If anybody uses Medium, which I don't think they do because nobody seems to use Medium, I'm currently trying to build that up, which is, but they pay, 5% of the writers on Medium earn money. So my goal which I don't usually talk about goals because it's stupid, but in the next 18 months, I'd like to make a penny or more from my medium, just to see as a small.
There we go. Perfect. I'll post a link to your
No, thanks, man.
to your IG in the show notes. And just for all the listeners there, if you did get value from this, if you learned something new, tag me, Mac Lifestyle Fitness, and tag Paul on your stories, and we will reshare it. But Paul, thank you so much again. Really appreciate you hopping on, and this was awesome. Thanks for your time.
For having me. I appreciate it.